Collègues, chers amis, bonjour. Greetings to all of you who have joined us from across the world. I'm honored by this invitation to make some brief remarks about the role of international courts and tribunals in promoting respect for the natural world. It is notable that in the tradition of the European Enlightenment, the idea of natural law was primarily a philosophical proposition, whereas today, in the shadow of catastrophic climate change, natural law is taking on an entirely different meaning. Whereas once we were told that disenchantment is the price of rationalistic modern progress, we are now approaching the inescapable conclusion, as many indigenous and other spiritual traditions have reminded us for generations, that we are not at the center of the world, but that we are part of an interdependent, indivisible whole, that we are an insignificant speck in an infinite universe, that life is possible on Earth because of a miraculous balance in nature without which we would become extinct. When it comes to the catastrophic consequences of climate change, small island states are the canary in the coal mine, their fate a warning to the rest of humankind of what awaits us if we continue along the current path. The scientific consensus reflected in the work of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is that we must keep temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels by the year 2100 in order to prevent catastrophic harm. The 1992 UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the 2015 Paris Agreement were adopted as models of global governance to address the mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions and adaptation to global warming. But based on the current nationally determined contributions, the world is set to achieve almost 3 degrees Celsius by the year 2100, almost twice what is required to avert catastrophic consequences. For small island nations whose very existence is threatened by rising sea levels and extreme weather events, the frustration with lack of progress in the COP process led in 2021 to a new front in the struggle for climate justice, a turn towards international courts and tribunals. At COP26 in Glasgow, the prime ministers of Antigua and Barbuda and Tuvalu established the Commission of Small Island States on Climate Change and International Law. The agreement was opened for signature by other small island nations, and today it has 9 members divided between the Caribbean and the Pacific. In December 2022, the Commission requested the first ever advisory opinion from the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, based in Hamburg, Germany, which was established under the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, seeking clarification of the obligation of states to preserve and protect the marine environment. The ocean, of course, is the biggest carbon sink in the world, absorbing some 93% of excess heat, and it regulates the global climate system through the complex conveyor belt that carries warm water from the tropics to the poles and cold water from the poles to the tropics. At around the same time, one of the Commission's members, Vanuatu, led a campaign for the UN General Assembly to request an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice based in The Hague on the wider obligations of states, including in respect of human rights. The point was to make clear that what small island states have been demanding for 30 years without success, namely radical mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions and loss and damages for harm caused by the major polluters, is already part of binding international law. For countries like Tuvalu, population 11,000, this is an existential question. If the major polluters fail to comply with their obligations and failing significant adaptation measures, Tuvalu will become uninhabitable in the coming generation. Quite simply, it will go under the sea. With this in mind, this David and Goliath contest began with many dismissing the capacity of these smallest of nations to lead such an effort, which in their view was destined to fail. Yet, with unity and purpose, the Commission succeeded in obtaining on 21 May 2024 an historic and unanimous advisory opinion from the Law of the Sea Tribunal, spelling out the obligations of states to do what is necessary to avert catastrophic harm, irrespective of the scheme under the Paris Agreement. Meanwhile, Vanuatu and its climate-vulnerable allies succeeded on 29 March 2023 in the adoption by consensus of a General Assembly resolution requesting an opinion from the World Court, and the hearing has been scheduled for December of this year, with an opinion anticipated in 2025. Yet another initiative is the Climate Change Advisory Opinion proceedings before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. This is a remarkable display of planetary politics, of global leadership by the smallest of nations, reminding us that what is happening to them will happen to the rest of us unless there is unified, immediate, and concerted action to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions. I had the honor of opening the case for the Commission before the Law of the Sea Tribunal in Hamburg, and it was exceptional to recite the scientific evidence before the 21 distinguished judges of the tribunal, one of whom you will hear from today. I mentioned how the first forms of life emerged from the ocean some 3.5 billion years ago, how it took hundreds of millions of years after that for enough oxygen to build up in the atmosphere to make life possible, and how today, for the first time in history, anthropogenic activity imperils our species, threatens the collapse of civilization. A stark reminder, as the Attorney General of Vanuatu said in his opening statement, that if we respect nature, nature will respect us. Meanwhile, in the realm of investor-state arbitration too, there is a lively debate emerging about the need to interpret investment treaties in light of the obligations of states on climate change, and not to impede states from adopting the necessary measures without facing billions of dollars in compensation claims. Clearly, this issue of fundamental importance for the future of humankind is making its presence felt, and it remains to be seen whether and how the emergence of this new jurisprudence, this call to climate justice based on international law, will have a bearing on how we grapple with climate change in the coming years. At the least, it shows that we should not underestimate the resilience of those, like small island nations, who may be on the margins of power realities in the global political order, but whose voice is being heard far and wide. I have no doubt that history will vindicate their ambition, not least because the natural world is on their side. I thank the organizers once again for giving me the honor of sharing these brief remarks, and I thank all of you for participating from across the world, for your concern and engagement for the future of humankind. I close with the words of the legendary medieval poet Saadi of Shiraz, from the land of my Iranian ancestors, who reminds us that in nature, in our essence, we are all inextricably interdependent, and that above all, it is empathy for those who suffer and the struggle for justice that defines what it means to be human. His words are, human beings are members of a whole, in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you have no sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. Thank you very much.